Father Gilbert, what was the inspiration behind that series? What made, and plus it also seemed to be geared towards an older audience.
Yes.
What was the reason behind that decision as well?
Yeah, honestly, because apart from the audio dramas, I was always constantly working on story ideas for novels,
Mhm.
for other things. I mean, I was constantly working on different projects and just playing around with ideas. And I had the idea for Father Gilbert long before we actually produced them. In
Mhm.
fact, I was fairly certain that it was not an idea that Focus on the Family would want to do, because of just the nature of it, the sort of the supernatural aspect, but it was also an Anglican priest,
Mhm.
and there was just a whole bunch of things to it that it didn't even occur to me, honestly, to present it to Focus on the Family as an idea to do. And I was thinking of it primarily as a book series. So
Right.
my original notes, all of my original, I did a whole proposal write up for my agent at the time to shop around to publishers. And so Focus on the Family and Radio Theater was not in my crosshairs, so to speak.
Right.
So, and it was interesting because I was developing it, and where it came from was just that exploration of an idea that struck me one day, which was, a detective, a Scotland Yard detective, becomes a clergyman in the Church of England. But there's this whole dynamic with him where there's a supernatural aspect that seems to follow him around. And so he gets drawn into these cases. Kind of hard to call them that because they're not obviously that. But and the idea intrigued me, and I looked and I couldn't find anything like it. I mean, to me, it seemed like such an obvious idea that I thought, well, somebody's done this, and
Right.
I couldn't find anything like it. And I thought, well, this is great. It gives me the crime solving thing, the whole secular credibility of a policeman then becoming a clergyman, which then gives me the chance to explore the spiritual ideas. So it gives me the best of both worlds, and that's why I wanted to pursue it as a book series.
Mhm.
And then I'm trying to remember. I think we were looking at radio theater, and radio Focus on the Family radio theater was on the air. It was
Mhm.
being broadcast. And so we sort of had to fill those slots. The stations would get a little bit impatient with us if we went too long without injecting new shows.
Mhm.
As much material as we had to keep, we could rerun a lot of this.
Right.
They wanted new things so that the audience would tune in for what's new. And I think that's where that came from. We were discussing what kinds of stories we could do, maybe original stories that we could plug into the schedule. And I think I had talked to Dave Arnold about it at some point.
Mhm.
And then it emerged. What about that? That could be a really interesting mystery series. And amazingly, Focus on the Family was fine to do it, and we did it. And it has a bit of a cult following, so to speak. And
Yeah.
I know there are a lot of Dave Arnold tells me that a lot of the inquiries they get about the future of radio theater usually has the question, and when are you going to do more Father Gilberts?
Uh,
So that's usually attached to it.
well, two questions. Uh, you said it was originally started as like a book series. I know that there was two Father Gilbert books that
Yeah,
take place.
those were done after the audio was done.
What
It
was
picks up where the audio left off.
Okie What? Why did the medium transition?
Well, Focus on the Family had pretty much moved away from production on radio theater. So we did, I think the last couple things we did was Mere Christianity and Oliver Twist might have been the last two. And we knew that it was unlikely to do more Father Gilbert's. So I did write the last two
Mhm.
mysteries interconnected to try to bring the series to something of a close.
Right.
Not a punctuation mark like done, but at least bring us to this point of, okay, now we're going to stop. And then if we get a chance to do it again, then we will. But then I had the opportunity through a publisher to go ahead and pursue the book series, which is ironically where it originally was supposed to start.
Right.
And then I just wound up doing two novels that pick up where the audio dramas left off. And then that stopped for various reasons. Actually, the publisher went out of business. I don't think it was my fault. And so I got busy doing other things and didn't pursue doing more Father Gilbert novels or nor with the opportunity to do more audio dramas.
Oh, wait a minute. I think,
There's Josh.
yeah, we got Josh. Josh, you got a
Can you
video?
hear me?
Hey, we
Yes.
can see you and hear you.
All
So,
right.
Paul McCusker, this is Grandpa Josh. We call him
There
Grandpa
we go.
Josh because he likes the news and NASCAR. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
where are you, Josh? You were
I'm over in beautiful Pagosa Springs, Colorado.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Welcome to your show.
Uh, if somebody approached you and wanted to do like a TV series, like or a Netflix series based off Father Gilbert's stories, would you be down, or would you kind of be like, I don't
No,
know?
no, actually, well, depending on the deal, but I would be very interested. In fact, I did take Dead Air and toyed with converting it into a TV script.
Really?
In fact, I did it. I think I finished the whole thing as sort of a pilot,
Mm.
and with the idea that maybe in England, because I had some connections that could have led into that, but obviously the connections were not strong enough to make anything happen. But I did that, but I would have wanted someone with more experience than I had to also look over and work with me on it to get it TV worthy. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It's just such a different discipline. And even though I've done
Hmm.
some screenplays over the years, I am far from having mastered the discipline. I mean, far, far, far away from mastering the discipline. So I would have wanted help with it. But I did do that. And yeah, I would love to. I think there are a lot of stories that could be told in the realm of Father Gilbert.
I know that you did the movie Beyond the Mask. Like you wrote
Yes.
the screenplay for that. Was that the first screenplay that you ever got like transitioned to like actually be on the screen or?
Well, technically, I did a couple of the original Adventures in Odyssey animation episodes.
Okay,
So I
okay.
did a couple of those. What did I do? Once Upon an Avalanche and oh, it's terrible. I've suddenly gone blank on the second one. So I did a couple of those and I worked with the well, basically the studios guys on that.
Mhm.
And they helped, and that was a good learning curve. But then the gap between writing those to Beyond the Mask,
Mhm.
which is almost 10 years ago now.
Whoa,
And
really? Oh, wow.
yeah, I think it's 2016, 2017. I mean, we're heading
Hmm.
into that kind of anniversary. And again, I did it, and then I went back to the writing that I normally do. And so I don't have any particular momentum in my screenwriting experience at this point. I would love to do more of that, but the opportunity just hasn't been there, and I've been busy with tons of other things.
Is
No.
it hard to put those different caps on, or is it fairly easy to swap them?
Well, I can swap them, but only if I know what I'm swapping to.
Mm.
Because I mean, and I don't think I'm saying things out of line here, but writing for kids, for example, audio drama
Yeah.
for kids, and then writing Beyond the Mask.
Mhm.
And I do remember the guys saying to me, Chad and Aaron, there were a couple of times when I was doing the script, and every now and again I'd get a note from them, kind of a bit of a chide that would say, you know you're not writing an audio drama here. In other words, I could relax and let the visual do the job. I didn't have to rely on, I could do a nod instead of a verbal acknowledgement. I could do things. And
Mhm.
also that I'm writing for grown-ups, even though the audience is still a particular sensibility that I think Odyssey served me.
Mhm.
Uh, the work I did for Focus on the Family served me in doing that screenplay. But part of it was, yeah, two different disciplines. So my instinct was to do in dialogue and to do certain things that I had always done with audio drama, but you don't have to do that
Right.
in film because the visuals show. And in fact, I'm now sensitive to watching TV shows or watching movies where they do say things that they didn't need to say.
Mm.
It feels a little expositional. to me.
Yeah.
And I'm sensitive to that, I think in part because Chad and Aaron Burns were trying to help me come out of my audio drama background in order to write a screenplay. And I'm grateful for that.
How did they approach you? Did they just like did they meet you somewhere and it was just like,
Yeah, they ran out of options, I think. I think they had exhausted themselves with every other writer they could think of. And then it was a mutual friend who they met with him about this because they had been working on developing this and getting the money for it and doing all that for ages.
Mhm.
And then they came to me, and it's really funny because when they contacted me, I I would often hear from people, and usually the people who would contact me about writing a screenplay for something, either uh, an adaptation of something I had written or something else, they would approach me, and I'd realize fairly quickly that they were hoping that somehow I was going to bring the money and the experience
Mm.
in order to make the film. I knew I was working with people who, yeah, they not experienced is what I'm trying to say. They're not
Right.
experienced people. They're
Right.
hoping that I'm going to bring that. And what I loved about meeting with Chad and Aaron was, and the other thing I was concerned about was that it was going to be kind of a coffee. I want to call it what some people call a kitchen table drama.
A
Mm.
kid.
Yeah,
What?
a kitchen table drama where it's all set modern and it's all set around, a domestic house situation and a lot of the evangelical films that had been coming out were that kind of thing,
Mm,
family dramas in essence. And that's fine, but I had been writing so many of those, with Odyssey and with other things, even pre-Odyssey, a lot of dramas for churches and things like that. That the idea of doing a kitchen table drama didn't really appeal to
mm,
me. And then again, I didn't really know them, and I didn't know at what level of experience they were coming to the whole thing. And so when they said they wanted to meet, I said, "Great, let's meet." And we actually sat down in Colorado Springs, actually a stone's throw from Focus on the Family, at a coffee place near there. And I think they got like the first line out.
mm,
They said, so the basic premise is the East India Company was like the biggest corporation in the world in the late 1700s. And so this story is about an assassin for them who they double cross, and then he wants revenge, but then his life takes some turns that take him to America during the Continental Congress and that whole period, and it meets some of the founding fathers.
right.
Well, I mean, they had me back at it's set in the 18th century. You have an assassin for the East India Company who's been betrayed.
Right.
I was in at that point. They
Oh,
really didn't need to do any more. I love the 1700s.
Hmm.
I'd always wanted to write for that period of history and in the way they were approaching it. I don't know. Everything they were half a sentence in, and I knew this is something that if I could work on it, I would be very happy to work on it. And they were very gracious in taking me on.
how long did it take to write the script for Beyond the Mask? What was the time frame?
That's a very good question because we met and outlined it. I mean, we did storyboards. And I think we still have, I have pictures or notes of all those. And we hammered through because they had an idea like, here's a key scene. And they said, I think we need to do this. And it's in the movie, the key scene. But I said, well, I don't know that we can drop into that because we're in a whole different century. And I'm not sure that people are going to quite understand what's the drama. So then we began to unpack and work through. Well, let's at least figure out whether we tell that part of the story or not, what led up to that scene, and then what happens afterwards.
Mm.
And so we spent a few days, honestly, working through the storyboard, just working through the plot and all of that. Then we kind of hammered out the outline for their approval, and they were like, "This is great." And then I began to fill it in with the dialogue and ideas, and we just kept going back and forth. But I wish I could remember how many months that would have been. My memory is that we pushed forward very aggressively in terms of how quickly we did everything.
Mm.
And because it was, it was an independent effort. They were raising the money, they were creating the costumes and the sets, they were doing everything. And then the only other thing was they really wanted to work with John Rhys Davis, and I had.
Oh.
So then it was, hey, how about getting John Rhys Davis into this? And so he wound up working on it as well, which was a lot of fun. And the actress who's now in, is it Chicago Hope? Our actress from Beyond the Mask is one of the main characters in one of the Chicago dramas, Chicago PD or Chicago Fire, or I think she went on to the series or was just starting the series when she filmed
Hmm.
Beyond the Mask. So that's another kind of feather in the cap, no pun intended.
Wow.
Was there supposed to be a sequel to Beyond the Mask potentially? Or
Well, we would have loved for there to be a sequel, and there was so much stuff. I wish I'd been able to do a novel,
Mm.
because I kept thinking there's a ton of stuff that we're not able. We didn't have the budget or the time to put it in this.
Hmm.
I see. My problem is I always default to a more serialized mentality with Odyssey, with everything. It's just the strength of a serialization to me is so good. And to me, this whole gold ring of making a movie that goes into the theaters, to me, is not as big a deal as it is to some people. To me, it's like if you want impact, you put the money into something that people are actually going to see, and that's something really well done for television.
Hmm.
And with the expansion and of Netflix, of Amazon Prime, of all of these platforms doing original programming, the opportunity to do that. I thought Beyond the Mask would have made for a really good series. And
Mm.
then you could take the time to unpack themes and ideas that I felt ultimately were really compressed
Hmm.
in the movie. And that's one of my regrets, was that we didn't get to do it as a series. But there's nothing that says that, maybe the opportunity would come up to go back and redo it or pick up where it left off or something.
That a spin-off series. That would be fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're going to be transitioning to the Adventures in Odyssey novel questions. So you
Okay.
wrote 12 Adventures in Odyssey, ones that are kind of like episodes, and then
Yes.
was it six passages? Six
Yes.
passages books. Did Focus on the Family approach you about these, or were these ideas that you had and that you approached Focus on the Family with?
I think it was both. I was working on Odyssey at the time.
Mhm.
We had talked about doing novels, or I was probably talking about doing novels. And then they decided that it was a good idea to do. I mean, because I think I might have been 2 or 3 years into the life of the show when we decided to do the novels. And then I had the challenge of, you have an ongoing audio drama where new episodes are being created pretty much constantly,
Mhm.
but a book and the time it takes to write and to get it published, then I was up against the, well, wait a minute, I don't want to create a parallel universe.
Mm.
Or this was before, the whole the Spider-Verse and all of the stuff they're doing now. And so I decided to set, at least I think the first six were kind of prequels
Right.
to the audio series. So that way I wouldn't collide with
Mm.
that. So then I told those stories, and I think it was after saying that was the Mark Prescott story arc. So there was the Mark Prescott, and then I think then 7 through 12, I dovetailed into the very beginning of the audio. So I think Connie shows up, and then you start to have the other characters. Mark Prescott leaves town in 6, but comes back in 12. But in those interim books, we had a bunch of the characters from the audio. And I tried to write those in a way that wouldn't encroach on the audio series.
Right.
So that was the idea. I think we got away with it. I think.
Did Mark Prescott need to leave because he wasn't at the beginning of the audio drama? Was that kind of like the mindset a little bit?
Well, again, I think in terms of story arcs, and for me, the whole story arc part of it, even though each book was sort of separate,
Mhm.
I felt, because the first book had to deal with the fact that Mark's parents were split. They
Right.
had split up. And he
Hmm.
felt guilty about it, wanted to get in the imagination station. He meets Wit, he's new to Odyssey, finds out about a time machine. He's convinced if he could go back in time, because like a lot of kids, he blamed himself.
Right.
He felt like it was his fault that his parents split up. And so I started there. And at some point, I'm always aware that this is focused on the family. And what are we going to do with estranged parents, except can we model how they get back together again? Not that all situations come to a happy ending like that, but to me, it was dramatically compelling to figure out how that might work. Well, then the twist in book six, I think, was that the parents do decide to get back together, but that means they're going to move away from Odyssey. So
Right.
Mark leaves because so he gets what he most wanted, which is his parents reconciling. But then the
Hmm.
downside to that for him was it meant moving.
Right.
Mm.
So they were leaving the town that he had become very fond of. So that's why he left. It wasn't strategic because of the audio drama. It was primarily because of the story arc I had created.
There was a blossoming romance between Mark Prescott and Patty Eldridge. As the
Yeah.
author, can did they get married like later
Oh, you mean later? You mean years
later on
to get
later
married?
just time has passed in the Odyssey.
Would you like me to say yes, they did?
I would very much love
You know what? I'm happy to say that they must have. Yeah, I'm happy
Yes.
they had to.
it feels so good with the Passages series. Was that like your idea and you pitched it to
Yes.
Focus? Okay.
Yeah.
Why was the reasons behind you choosing each of those biblical stories? Like, what, why?
Well, the first premise to me, I mean, the basic premise, like Father Gilbert, like anything, was what's the basic idea or Mark Prescott's story if a kid could go back in time to change about his parents splitting up. And it was the same thing here. I think I had been toying. I mean, I'm a big lover of I want to say parallel universes and time travel and things
Hmm.
like that, which I think is obvious from the show. And I'd already worked on a collection of books called the Time Twist Tales.
Okay.
And it's a trilogy that I did before I wrote Passages that was about, I wanted to tell three different stories with three different kind of time twist aspects. So they're not exactly like, but there's a whole mythology that I created for that. And I think that might have been on my mind because then I had this idea. I think it was almost like a film image. A lot of your viewers may not be aware of The Prisoner of Zenda by Anthony Hope. So Anthony Hope wrote this book. It's been remade two or three times as movies. I mean, really good movies. And it's a swashbuckler kind of thing where, twins, a king gets kidnapped, and just at that time a guy comes in from England who looks exactly like the king, and they basically say we need you to pretend to be the king
Hmm.
so the kingdom doesn't fall into chaos and all that. But it's set in this sort of pre-World War One country, and that's what was on my mind. And I had this image of a sword fight on a train.
Hmm.
And then, of course, when I get one image or a thought or an idea, then I unpack it. Well, why are these guys fighting? What's going on? And that was Darian's Rise. What came out of it was, oh, well, what if? Because I think most of the stories start with a what if. I could set plot point for plot point Bible stories into an alternate reality
Mm.
that might help the stories come alive
Right.
for readers. So now they would go, oh, the way I did it there, now when they go back to the story of David
Hmm.
and that period of David's life leading up to the point of him becoming king, what would that be like? And might it help them? Might it stimulate the imagination so they're not necessarily thinking, oh, it's sort of dry. I hate to put it this way, but I think you guys don't know what I mean. Oh, it's the Bible, so it's going to be boring.
Hmm.
And I don't know that how many people really think that, but I'm assuming that some do. So I thought, well, if I could tell these stories, maybe it might stimulate the imagination when kids are reading or hearing those stories from the Bible. And the natural one for me was the David story, which was book one. Well, then I did, I guess what anyone would do is I looked at the rest of what I considered the best stories,
Hmm.
the most popular ones and the ones that were really compelling without having to for me to have to work too hard. And what I had to do was transpose them to this other world. And that was the challenge was how do I take this and make it work there and bounce all over a timetable? In other words, this timeline for Odyssey, which was the original. I don't think those books are out now, but the original stories had a top and a tail, prologue, epilogue, in
Yeah.
terms of the
Hmm.
manuscripts and then the stories themselves. And these were kids going from Odyssey into this other reality, but at different times in Odyssey's history.
Right.
So they're kind of slipping through to this other reality and experiencing all this and then coming back. And then I left the question open, like, are these stories real? Wit is dealing with manuscripts saying, wait a minute, there's a weird connection and we know what the story is,
Mm.
but what are we talking about? And I also think there was an evangelistic aspect, not only to bring the Bible alive for those who knew the stories, but maybe bring it alive for those who didn't know the stories so that they became engaged in the passage of stories. And then somebody says, well, that's the story of Noah. That's the story of Elijah or whoever. And then it might bring it alive for people who don't even know the Bible or wouldn't necessarily care about it. I really liked the story arc.
Right.
I enjoyed that story arc in the Odyssey realm and how that concluded. But I also kind of enjoyed trying to figure out how to transpose the stories.
Mm.
And one of them dealt with an atomic weapon. And I kept thinking I was going to hear from, Homeland Security when I'm looking up online how to build an atomic bomb, you know, because I realized I have no knowledge of what this thing could possibly. I don't know how to make one. So I think I was focused on the family looking up, how to do this, waiting to hear from either our own internal security people or hearing from, the government, like, why are you doing that?
So with Adventures in Odyssey, how did you initially get involved with the show? Because
Oh, without getting all tangled, I want to say simply the answer is Chuck Bolte.
okay.
And the reason for that is that Chuck Bolte was the director for years of a traveling uh, Christian drama group called the Jeremiah People.
Hmm.
Mm.
And they toured the United States. They were out of California, but they toured the United States. And every year we brought them to our church in Bowie, Maryland. So they would come and perform. And as I began to get serious about writing as a, in junior high and senior high, when
Mhm.
I thought about Christian drama or Christian anything, I generally thought of it as second rate. I just thought most of it is just not very good. But Chuck and the Jeremiah People, they were doing stuff that was genuinely funny and had a genuine, solid dramatic credentials in terms of the credibility of what they were doing. So when I was getting serious about writing, um, I began to write first for my church, dramas for my church. And my inspiration for that, to a great degree, was Jeremiah People, those scripts, because I looked at those and went, well, this is the kind of thing that I aspired to write at that level of quality. And so I started writing sketches for our church, and then it was one act plays, and then full length plays. And then those were getting published through different publishing houses so other churches could do them. And some of them are still out there. And then I connected with Chuck. I met him when he came to our church, but then I started sending him, I mailed him my stuff. And he liked it. And he said, well, one day you and I are going to work together. So in 1985, I said I was trying to figure out how to compress this, but in 1985, circumstances for me in Bowie, Maryland, where I had grown up, had changed suddenly. I mean, it was like job change. I mean, everything just kind of imploded. And
Mm.
Chuck said, you need to come to California, load up the truck and head for Beverly. And so I did. I actually loaded up my Chevy Spectrum and drove across country and went to work with Chuck Bolte and the Continental Singers, which was the parent organization of Jeremiah People. And so I was working with him, but he was also consulting with Focus on the Family on these new dramas that they were doing called Family Portraits.
Mhm.
They were experimenting with the idea of audio drama with Dr. Dobson's broadcast.
Right.
And that's where Steve Harris and then Phil Lawler and the team began to assemble for what would become Adventures in Odyssey or Odyssey USA.
Mhm.
And I remember Chuck coming to the office one day at Continentals and he said, hey, I'm consulting with this organization. They need writers. would you be interested in writing an audio drama? Maybe
Mhm.
take a stab at it. And I said, do they actually pay anything? And I think it was like $200 or something. But he said, yeah, I mean, they're very serious about this. And I said, oh, well, yeah. So I started freelancing for them. I think it was October of 1986. And I wrote one of the family portraits episodes. And then it was only a short time before that. And then they decided to launch the kids series, Odyssey USA, which then became Adventures in Odyssey.
Mhm.
And I began working with them as a freelancer. I think I actually wrote the second episode that they aired. I think Connie Comes to Town. No, Wits Flop would have been the first.
Mhm.
The life of the
And I
party.
did Life of the Party, I
Yeah.
think was my first Odyssey episode. And they aired that, I think, second. But and then it was only not long after that that I went on staff. Because the show launched November of 87. I actually went on staff January of 88. And then that was it.
You had your hand in like the three major intrigue arcs, like the Blackguard Chronicles, the Novacom,
Mhm.
Hmm.
the Green Ring Conspiracy.
Hmm.
Which one would you say you're most proud of, and which one was the most fun to make,
Mhm.
if that makes any
Now
sense?
see, and I'm not trying to duck and dodge, but the three of them were so different.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it's comparing, apples to oranges to, I don't know, bananas. I don't know. It's very hard because, I mean, the whole Blackguard sequence was, I want to say, kind of hodgepodge. I mean, we started it, and then the story arc was sort of emerging
Mhm.
as Phil and I were working on it, and it emerged, and Phil would come with ideas, and then I would come with ideas, and we were just sort of playing it through until we realized that we have to sort of, from my point of view, Blackguard, we needed to deal with him as a bad guy who was
Mhm.
getting away with a lot. And I kept
Mhm.
thinking, this is Adventures in Odyssey. What are we teaching the kids about this guy who's getting away with everything?
Right.
And so there was a point where we need to bring this to a conclusion. There's got to be a comeuppance, but then that led into discussions like, but would Blackguard really allow himself to be taken to jail? Is he that sort of person? Isn't there something more almost mythological about him that means there's something bigger going on? And we kind of wrestled through all those questions about
Mhm.
how to deal with that. So I don't mean to say it was hodgepodge in a way that sounded reckless, but it came together over time. And that's very different from Novacom, which was the next one. And so with Novacom, I had this core idea. And one of the things I love about Novacom was the fact that we as writers, we really were working as a team. I mean, solidly. It wasn't individual episodes that just happened to come together. I had this idea, the core idea of what was the whole Novacom thing. I presented it, and then we said, but you know what? We are really going to map this out
Mhm.
and play this out and see where we're going to take it. And did. And I mean, and it was me and Marshall and Kathy and John and Bob Hoos. And I mean, we just had so many involved. And then
Mhm.
they divvied up the assignments. I mean, it was really like doing a TV series, the way I understood TV series are often written, especially more of the dramas. And so the characters, the ideas, I came to the table with a bunch of them. And just by way of the initial, here's what I think is going on. Here's the idea. And it's funny because now I look back and think it's almost prophetic because we're talking about minds and implants and experimenting with something that's a bit beyond what they were able to do at the time. And what are the side effects of that? Everything we were talking about then, we are now discussing with artificial
Mhm.
intelligence.
Yeah.
So here we are 25 years later, and the same discussions are more or less being had or explored because of what happens when we create new technology and how it often slips its leash. And then suddenly we've got side effects we never anticipated. What I most loved about that was how involved everybody was in the creation of that. That was a great team effort. And then with Green Ring, my affection is based on because when we came up to it, I knew what I wanted to do. And the team at that point we were sort of freelance. We didn't have the team all on staff where we could have day-to-day discussions and act. I mean, we had some of that, but I just thought, I know what I want to do with this. So for better or for worse, I'm going to write it all.
Hmm.
I'm going to just own it and figure it out and make it work. And I have affection for it, because of the fun and the joy of doing that,
Mhm.
outlining it, writing it, but mostly the characters. I mean, introducing Penny, and you bring Mr. Skint in and Buck, and then you've got all these new characters coming alongside our established characters, and we get to see them doing their thing, Wit and Eugene and all of Connie, all of them being who they were. And
Hmm.
um, so I have, yes. And then the third story arc I mean, one after that is Ties That Bind, but it's
Right.
not a mystery story arc. It's relational, but very happy with that one too. I really just enjoyed the work on it, the writing it and working with the actors and everything that came out of that.
Because it was like a singular vision. Is that what like
Yeah, and that's why it's so hard to answer the question. It's not a duck and dodge. It's the fact that when you look at those story arcs, they are just so different. And then of course I go to the circumstances around them,
right.
the writing and who we were working with and who came in to do the acting and all of that. So they're so very different. But that's one reason why I like them very differently, and it's hard to pick a favorite.
Was the Green Ring conspiracy based off actual counterfeiting events that actually happened? And if it
Well, what happened is the idea came ahead of the information. I think, if I remember correctly, Green Ring began with this idea of the kids finding a backpack, a plane crash thing with this backpack full of money, finding the backpack full of money. That I think that was the real starting point for me. Kids find a backpack full of money. Okay, then what? And it's the what if they did. And then, well, then it grew from there. Then it became like, well, what is it doing there? And now I got to figure out everything that leads up to it and what does it lead to. And so I was working on, funny enough, I also tied into the Maltese Falcon. A
really
bunch of the names, if you look at the names, I mean, if you look at the names of some of the characters, they are directly connected to the Maltese Falcon. Because you remember in the movie, the thing that they're all chasing after turns out not to be the real thing.
uh,
Hmm.
It's a counterfeit. So it's the same thing. So then, in terms of a thematic side, I began to wonder, okay, how can I explore the idea of deception and counterfeit? And you have to know, and then it comes down to that simple phrase, you have to know what the truth is to know a lie. We have to know what the truth is. And so I began to explore that, but turn it into this sort of mystery adventure thing. But to explore from different angles that theme and then introduce the characters and the plot situations and the twists and turns. And that was the driver for me. And then to do it and to do it credibly, I then started researching counterfeiting and
man.
case studies of counterfeiting and counterfeiting attempts and how they do it and on down the line. So I didn't want to get lost in that for the sake of the audience or have them get lost in it. But I did research after the fact to say, okay, well, if this is a bag of money and it's counterfeit money, or if this is all about counterfeiting, then what? And I need to do my research. So
Hmm.
I
I loved the Green Ring conspiracy. I think it's my personal favorite of yours.
know. I'd rather have it a favorite than other words that you might say about things I've written. So I appreciate that.
Is there anything about those three major story arcs that you would be like, man, if I could go back, I would change this, or if I
Hmm.
keep that, or is it kind of just like, you know what, I like it the way it was, and I wouldn't change a thing?
Well, I tend not to. I mean, honestly, because we can't anyway. I'm not George Lucas. I don't go back and do a lot of revisions and much as I might want to. I mean, it's a learning curve. So when I go back and listen to something and I kind of cringe a little bit at a line I'd written or something, or a plot thing that I had done that might have come off a bit too contrived or whatever the case may be. Um, yeah, I kind of wish I had done that differently, but it doesn't mean that I would want to go back and do it differently because
Right.
learning that then informs the next thing that I do.
Mhm.
So that's the upside and the downside of what I perceive to be mistakes. But then I've talked to people where I've said that, oh, I wish I'd done this differently, and they said, why would you? No, that was my favorite bit. So the very thing that I'm thinking, I'm not sure about that. Other people are going, no, we loved it. My family loved it. So we're glad you did it that way, whatever the case may be. So that's a big part of it is just the learning curve
Mm.
and taking that on. So when I look back, I wish I had more episodes for. See, my problem is I am notorious for writing too much. I'm supposed to do a two-parter, it becomes a three-parter. I'm supposed to do a 12-parter, and by the time it's done, we're at 14, 15 parts. The Ties That Bind was supposed to be 12 episodes, and it really was 20.
Really?
Yeah, because it spills into the
Wow.
next album, but that next album is
Mm.
really a continuation of Ties That Bind. I mean, you've got your 12 for the album, but then you go into taking the plunge or whatever that next one was, and that's a continuation. It was just all the same story arc.
Hmm.
So I'm the one that always seemed to get caught out doing that. And so I remember, I think it was the last couple of episodes of Green Ring. The pressure was on. I had to wrap this thing up. I did Dave Arnold as executive producer is like, no, we are not spilling in to we have to get
Mm.
this thing done. You've got to get it done. And so I can't disagree. We were writing to 12 episode albums and unless I had a big plan for how we were spilling into the next, but everybody felt, no, we've got to finish this out. And so I finished it out and it felt a bit like a crush a little bit to me. Now, I don't know that anybody else felt that, but it just felt a bit breathless in a way because I was compressing so much in. And then we did sort of the follow up. The last thing I officially wrote for Odyssey was The Long End,
Mhm.
which is like the addendum to Green Ring because you've got Buck dealing with Skint and his past and all that. And that to me was a six-parter that I had to compress into three parts
Uh,
and that kind of thing. So, that's on me. I'm just notorious for doing that. I overwrite or whatever and don't know how to untangle myself from my overwriting, I think. There is, by the way, in Ties That Bind, an
mhm.
entire story arc that I didn't write.
Really?
And where you'll find it is when, gosh, forgive me, the Parker girl
Olivia.
into the imagination station, and then she comes out and she's had a major something happened.
Right.
Well, I actually outlined the entirety of the something that happened.
Mhm.
Mm.
But again, ties that bind being 12 that became 20. And if I had
Mhm.
done what I was going to do, that would have added another, and there are budget and time and production constraints that everybody has to follow. I have to follow this. Dave Arnold is saying we can't do it. And then I thought of doing it as a book series, kind of like Passages. I said, oh, well, you know
Mhm.
what? But then it was impractical. We kept going, wait a minute. By the time and I was also working on the Imagination Station books at the time. But then it was like, okay, I outlined it, I could do it, but the time it would take, and by the time it would get published and come out, it would be so far removed from the series that people may not even get it. And we were also
Mm.
thinking naively that the whole family discussion, family matter, had calmed down.
Mm.
Now, of course, it's come up again because of all the gender stuff and everything else.
Mhm.
Because really the driving question was, does God have a design for family, and does it even matter? Does
Mhm.
family matter at all? If it went away, if family is, we understand it from, say, a Judeo-Christian scriptural basis. If it went away, who cares? Does it really is it a social construct? Is it a cultural construct? So that's what Ties That Bind was trying to go after, was exploring God's design. Well, this parallel series was going to take that a step further and
Mm.
explore an almost apocalyptic scenario
Mm.
to show that, to represent it from a different angle. And then I still have all the notes and everything I could have done, but We just haven't gotten around to doing it. Much like doing more passages books, which
Mm.
that subject comes up from time to time.
Really? Do you consider doing more passages books?
I would consider it if I could find the angle,
Mm.
not so much for the Maris side of the story, but kind of a story arc over that that would be compelling or plausible or something that that would get it. Because I don't like to go back and repeat what
Mm.
I've been doing, what I've done.
Mm.
To me, the six passages are sort of complete, but
Right.
I could be persuaded to do more, but I wouldn't do just one more. In
Right.
other words, if I'm going to do something, there's got to be some sort of a reason to do three, a story arc of some sort, something that would be compelling enough to say we're going back into this world. Otherwise, why do it?
Right.
Hmm.
So
But
that's a consideration.
but concerning Olivia Park.
Olivia, thank you. I don't know why I went blank on her name,
No,
but yeah,
no, no, you're good. You're good.
yeah.
Is there any way we could get just a little bit of a leak of what would have been if you had like the bigger
Well, I gave you a little clue, and that was
the
something
apocalypse?
dystopian,
Okay.
apocalyptic in a way, but
Um,
not horrendously end of the world.
right.
Maybe a little more like 1984, or
Okay.
Hmm.
Oh, that
but
would have been okay.
if things are unleashed and you have this parallel, because I realized, and see, now I'm saying way too much. I realized we didn't want to go back in time, and I couldn't go forward in time. So what if we went sideways? And we
Hmm.
went to a parallel Odyssey where family didn't matter.
Mhm.
Family as we knew it disappeared. What does that world look like? And I mapped it all out. And in terms of plot lines and who's there and what they're like and what the world is like, it's a whole other mythology. And yeah, I might get to it one day if anybody's ever interested in it, but
I'm
not
interested.
not now. Yeah, I'm running out of time as my runway is a lot shorter than I've got more time behind me than I have ahead of me.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think it's there to be done. It just needs to be.
Do have a question concerning have you listened to the recent Odyssey album, well, recent, a couple of years ago, the 28 Hours story arc? Did you?
No, and I will confess that when I came away from Odyssey for my own sake, I came completely away.
Mm.
And so I don't know the characters, the plot lines. I don't know what they're up to. I occasionally hear snippets from fans or even from the team because I see these guys a lot,
Right.
so it'll kind of come over, oh, well, we're working on this or we've written that or we've got these characters. But yeah, I'm so involved in my own worlds,
Right.
creatively and otherwise, that to try to stay on top of Odyssey would just be too hard.
Could I spoil alert for 28 hours? But
Well,
like
you could, yeah. I mean, go ahead.
they have the reappearance of the chairman from the Novacom saga.
Hmm. Yeah, I
What
think I'd heard that.
you heard that? What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that? Because I remember because
Well, it
yeah.
depends on what they do with them. Because when we did Novacom,
Mhm.
um, the very first thing, because we all seem to agree that revisiting
Mhm.
characters seems a bit, forgive me for putting it this way, not lazy, but a
Mm.
bit too convenient. And you see it all the time. I mean, if you're a Doctor Who fan, and
Hmm.
you just, you've got all these shows, and
Yeah.
they just seem to bring characters back in many ways unnecessarily.
Mhm.
So after Blackguard, when we were doing Novacom, it was like, well, I don't want a bad guy like Blackguard. We've done Blackguard.
Right.
There's only one of them, and we've done it. So now I was thinking more of a corporate entity,
Mm.
but and so we're dealing with a conspiracy, of people and doing things trying to push this whole technology forward. And that meant a corporation or some sort of corporation, and then that meant, well, there's a chairman, there are people in charge of this thing.
Right.
So without repeating Blackguard, who would the chairman be? There's got to be, and is it a shadowy figure? Is it, who is it? But whoever it is, you just have this hierarchy. And that was the whole idea, is you have sort of a hierarchy. And that was a vague sort of thing. Was I don't remember in our notes or our meetings that we got hyper specific because we liked the idea of the mystery of it.
Mm,
And I don't remember us ever saying, well, we will never go back to this.
mm,
So for them to bring the chairman, to bring that into play again, some would say, well, we needed to, much like me doing the long end with Skint.
mm.
It's like, well, there are some loose threads that could be looked at and exploited or for a story's sake. And so, I don't have strong feelings about it, depending on what they're doing with it,
Right.
and even then it's not my show, so it's whatever I think or feel about it isn't even relevant.
Mm.
But I do have a question about the chairman. Was the chairman ever considered to be Margaret Frey, the mayor of Odyssey? Because I heard there was a theory that she
Well,
was.
I think, yeah, now that you're even saying that, I have a vague recollection that that came up as a theory,
Right.
either as an idea or a theory, but I don't remember any of us locking in on it. But back in the day, our discussion, because we're talking 25 years ago,
Right.
um, I do remember that coming up, but my memory is that I wanted to avoid getting that kind of specific.
Mm,
Mm.
I just wanted to, sometimes in mysteries there are some good loose threads that you want to
Hmm.
keep loose.
mm.
And because writing and plot, it really is. It's like having an ace up your sleeve.
Right.
All I could think is the card idea. You want cards to play, and sometimes you have more cards than you actually play,
Right.
and that's the way it is.
Hmm.
Some of the best dramas, as long as in a story arc you are resolving the major questions, that's just writing 101. You're resolving the major questions, but to leave some questions unanswered. I mean, you can argue that Father Gilbert was an exercise in unanswered questions because I wasn't about to tie up tight explanations about how these things happen. And the over explaining, by the way,
Mm,
if you go all the way back to the imagination station, one of the things, and I've told this story probably too many times, but I used to have an edition of The Time Machine by H.G. Wells.
mhm,
And the edition I had in my memory, I remembered that I saw an edition or had an edition with a prologue written by Isaac Asimov. And in the prologue, he goes through this whole explanation about time travel, all the different theories about time travel. But one of the things that he says about H.G. Wells' Time Machine, the biggest fault of the book was that H.G. Wells over explained how the time machine worked.
mm,
Michael Crichton did the same thing with Jurassic Park.
mm.
And Asimov said within 2 years of writing The Time Machine, everything that H.G. Wells asserted was proven wrong scientifically because H.G. Wells was writing based on, then I think Einstein came along. You know what I mean? So the one thing you don't want to do is over explain. What you want is to explain enough so that your audience will buy into it. It's credible and plausible. And that's as much to me as you want to do. So we refer, I mean, unless they've done something I don't know about, but the technology of the time machine, of the imagination station, has never been fully explained,
Right.
except that it's a form of virtual reality that may or may not be an actual time machine,
Mm,
and that sort of thing. But
Hmm.
then you get in the imagination station books and other peripheral things that then suggest it really is. But we don't explain how that's possible. Michael Crichton did a book called Timeline where he explained all that. And
mm,
I had read Timeline, and the idea of a corporation getting behind a time machine for their own nefarious purposes was a direct inspiration for Novacom.
mm.
I had just read that book and I went, what if, and rather than time machine, what if you created a technology where somebody with a handicap could look at a TV and just by thinking of it could change the channel? What if you could just do these things? And if you can do that and a company was developing it, what nefarious things might come out of that
Right.
by way of developing it for altruistic reasons, but also developing it for either monetary or other reasons. Now we're back to the whole artificial intelligence issue.
Hmm.
That's all. I mean, honestly, this stuff just circles the drain over and over again. So that was a big part of it, was not over explaining. And there are times when it's best not to over-explain everything. You give just enough of the explanation that the audience will take it as credible, and then you leave the rest of it alone. That's my sage advice in storytelling, because it'll only get you in trouble if you get too specific.
How much do you write in one day typically, or one week? Like, because you do write a lot, and I actually find that to be a very good quality. So,
Um,
how would could
yeah, I'm
somebody?
all about quantity and not quality. That's
No.
my motto. But I don't know. It's funny because friends of mine who are writers, they have word amounts.
Mhm.
And sometimes it'll be a number of words and or I'm going to finish this chapter. I write until just I know I'm done writing for the day
Mm.
or I reach a natural stopping point. I will say, and I'm not saying this to brag because of how it turned out, but I was working on a novel and I wrote 15,000 words in one day.
Oh my goodness.
So I was working on this novel and I had kind of got myself away from all the distractions. And I sat down and I went at this. And I'd never written that many words. And and I don't count the words anyway. I'm usually thinking in terms of just what's the natural stopping point, whether it's scene
Mm.
in a play or you reach the end of Act One or the end of the episode or the middle of the episode, whatever the case may be. And I still do that. I just write until I'm done, for the day or whatever.
Hmm.
And I did it. But the reason I even mentioned it isn't to brag, but as a lesson. Because when I finished the book and I handed it into the publisher, they said, now, we contracted you to write, this like 90,000 word book, and you've handed in a book that's 132,000 words, and we're not going to publish that. You have to cut.
Oh.
And so I had to cut like 30,000 words out of this.
Mm.
Now, I think the book was better for it because I had put a lot of stuff. I became very enamored by my research, historical and otherwise. And I think a lot of what got cut out of that was my $15,000, 15,000 word day got cut
Mm.
almost in its entirety. I think by the time it was published, that whole section that I had written was reduced to a paragraph. And
Oh.
but it was a lesson learned because one could argue that I had just chased some rabbits that I was enamored by, and the reader wouldn't have been. And the editor was right. He was brilliant to say, this is superfluous. We don't really need it. I know you like it, but we don't really need it. And he was right.
I was gonna say, what's the process of you creating a new character? Like, do you outline what your character does, or
Yes, all the
okay?
above. Honestly, I honestly wish I had a good answer for this because in all the years that I've been doing this, characters emerge
Mhm.
to me. I discover them. Well, the truth is, writing is discovery anyway. Because no
Mhm.
matter how much I've outlined things, I always hold on loosely. I always have to leave room for the idea that could take this thing off into a better direction. And it's the same thing because I'm working on some things now, and people who are reading what I'm writing are like these characters. They're talking about the characters, and I don't know where they come from. I just sort of they just arrive. And there are a lot of factors that lead to that. We've often told the story, for example, of Eugene.
Right.
So Eugene could easily have been the so-called, computer wore tennis shoes type character. He could have been one-dimensional, could have, but our instinct was that he wasn't going to be that way. But really, what clinched it was Will Ryan's performances. So once we went in, and that whole dynamic is feeding off of each other,
Hmm.
we're writing and Will does the first script as Eugene. We hear it. Now that's in our heads. And what he's doing is informing us, and that's informing what we're writing for him to do.
Mm.
And it's so the character of Eugene, any character, whether it's in a team setting or interaction with actors, or it's just in your head, um, just again, hold on loosely. I do remember Jerry Jenkins, who wrote the Left Behind series. In one of the books, a major character was killed.
Mhm.
and people were furious. And Jerry's explanation was simply, it's not my fault. He was dead when I found him.
Mm.
And I thought, but that's how it works. And this is also why writers often talk about characters just slipping out of their control.
Mm.
It happens. I'll tell you, Harlow Doyle was notorious for that, and Wooten is notorious for that. And there are other situations that have come up. As characters, they're very easy to just go off and do whatever they're going to do. But if you are being true to the character in your writing, you're not contriving what they're doing, but they're doing what they would really do. Very often they will take the writer in a direction that the writer wasn't conscious of going, which sounds crazy when you think about it. Because the writer's consciousness is everything that's going on, and yet it's not. That means there's something else going on. Call it free will. I don't know what you want to call it, except there's something else going on that's at play. So if I'm writing a character, and it's really funny because you write and you're playing with this character and you're still trying to discover who the character is. And then it sort of clicks. And then you have to go back and
Mm.
rewrite early dialogue or early sections because you realize you had the character saying some things and doing some things that that character really wouldn't do.
Mm.
And you know that now. The character has taught you.
Right.
I would not do that. So you need to go back and fix what you had me do.
Wow.
That's the wild part of what it is that we do. It's a form of insanity, I think.
So for people who struggle with writing not wooden dialogue, what's your best tip for them?
My advice to them would be make it sound naturally. No, no, really. Honestly, and this isn't, it might sound contrived, but the truth is, if action is an extension of character,
Mhm.
what they say or don't say is an extension of character. And what is said about them is an extension of other characters. So honestly, if everything is intertwined, and I've got this idea, I mean, we've all seen movies and TV shows where you just knew that the writer needed to get the character from point A to point B, no matter how that was going to happen. And
Mhm.
so he just did it, even though you're going, I don't even know why the character did that.
Mm.
I don't, it doesn't make sense to me. Now, that's okay if there's a mystery behind it. It's like, why did the character do that? And then you find out later on the character did that because, of some scene with his mother when he was 7 years old that played into whatever that moment was, or something else at play. But what you don't want is the writer to go, I needed my character to do it, so I forced him to do it.
Mm.
And so the same with dialogue. The thing about dialogue, and I'm not talking about dialect or accent, I'm not talking about all that. I'm just talking about much as you would try to be judicious with action. What is my character doing and why is my character doing this? You know, I know I need because my plot line says I need him to do that. But that's not good enough. The character needs to do it because the character would do it
Right.
or not do it. And the same thing with dialogue. It's the same thing with everything. I love dialogue and I get lost in it. So again, and as I said earlier about Beyond the Mask, um, it's very easy for me to get lost in dialogue because I love words, or I love, especially if it's comedic. Writing for somebody like Wooten. See, the thing about Wooten for me was he isn't comedically anarchist.
Right.
There's method to his madness. There's generally something behind when he goes off on just all kinds of goofy stuff that sounds random and it sounds like, oh, the writers are just trying to be clever. But generally, much like wit inventing things, my view is that wit didn't invent things just to invent, though there is pure joy in doing something for the fun of it. But
Mhm.
if it was going into wit's end, there was a reason for it to be there
Mhm.
because he was an inventor who was also a teacher.
Mm.
Even if it wasn't obvious, there was still a reason for it. Same thing. Characters need to have a reason for what they're doing, unless they're the type of character who is just so completely off the wall, borderline insane that you don't even know what the reason is. And yet the character would think he has a reason.
Hmm.
everybody has a reason for what they do, whether they even know what it is or not. So honestly, that sounds too easy by way of advice, but I think that's at the heart of it. So my lesson with writing a book, historical book, I loved what I was learning about periods of history, and I wanted everything in that book.
Hmm.
But I had an editor who went, yeah, but you got to stay with the plot and your
Mm,
characters and all this stuff that you just thought was so fascinating. Nobody's going to care about unless it's relevant to the story, the characters, whatever.
mm,
And that was the lesson is to let go of things so the story and the characters can get on with it, you know. So I don't know if it's certainly not concise advice, but it's advice of a sort.
You said like writing is like discovery,
It's exploration and discovery. I mean,
exploration, discovery.
yeah, no, and that by the way would be Father Gilbert. Unlike Adventures on Odyssey, which started off as being primarily a teaching show, and
Right.
still is to a great degree. I mean, that's the expectation is that there are lessons to be learned.
Mhm.
What I realized when I started into like Father Gilbert specifically was that it was more of an exploration. I
Mhm.
wasn't trying to teach on these things. I wasn't trying to put out some lesson. I was exploring some ideas. That's the
Right.
beauty to me. I think the
mm,
best art is more about exploration
Mhm.
than overt teaching, which seems ironic for somebody who worked on a kind of a teaching show. But it
Mhm.
was also for a group, an audience, and their families that allowed for that to work. I mean, to do what we did, and it seemed to work. I mean, it's still going, so something.
mhm,
But with Father Gilbert, it's more exploration. So writing to me usually starts with the what if
Mhm.
of an idea of something, sometimes with a character, sometimes with something that I find interesting. And then you build on that and you go into the exploration of the idea or the theme, and then what you discover along the way as you're exploring it.
So would you say that the themes in your story you kind of just figure it out as you write it, or you're going like these are the things I want to explore, or I'm starting to write.
They were both. See, with Adventures in Odyssey, we did it. It was all that. I mean, there were situations where we went, okay, we need to do a story about, I don't know, selfishness or about lying or something, and then you construct a story with that. There were other times when we would think we had a loose idea of a theme or an idea, a lesson,
mhm,
and then we would get all the way through, halfway through the script or all the way through, and you suddenly realize, oh no, no, the story isn't about that at all.
mm,
It's not the theme we thought it was. And then you have to go back and shore up the theme that it turned into, which, it may have been started off lying, but then became more subtle than that, about a particular kind of deception or whatever. And so there was that. And then other times, Odyssey episodes were written when we just thought of interesting things like, you know, Eugene being put in a position where Connie has to teach him how to drive.
mm,
Eugene being put in a position where Bernard's beating him at chess,
Yeah.
and Eugene can't figure out how he's doing it. That how he's doing it confounds him to the very core. So then you're dealing with plot ideas that have to do with the character and conflict and things that are funny or poignant or dramatic in that respect. And then you see what themes emerge from it. Sometimes the theme will come after, or bubbles to the top, as C.S. Lewis said.
Hmm. Do you ever struggle with perfectionism when writing? And what would be your advice to writers who struggle with perfectionism
Well, I
stuff?
think anybody who looks at what I've been writing would say, well, clearly he doesn't have an issue with perfectionism. No, I mean, what I would say to people who struggle with it, there's an argument to be made that perfectionism is an extension of a particular kind of pride, and we are not meant to be prideful. We are meant to be do the best we can with the talent and the craft that
mm,
we've hopefully learned to go along with the God-given talent. But what I would say is usually, at least my understanding of it, because I don't, but I do know a form of perfectionism that comes from the editor being turned on too soon,
mm,
because we have both at play usually, well, some of us. And that would be you have to have that period where you let go. You're not polishing everything up as you go along. You just need to get it all out there and put things into place and figure these things out. Then you go back in second draft or third, and then you begin to tighten it all up. You sort of you work at the next phase, and then you go back. And there's some point where you're moving from the pure creative side of it, where you're just going with your instincts, going with what you've learned and building on that. And then there's a point where it's appropriate for the editor to show up in
Right.
your mind and then look afresh at what you've been doing
Hmm.
and determine, is it working? Isn't it working? I need to fix this. This is too long. I need to shorten it.
How many drafts would you typically do for an Odyssey script versus a book?
Yeah, well, I mean, there can be a difference, but fact is, with an Odyssey script, because I hate to put it like this, we were under the gun, so to speak. We're writing to deadlines. We're trying to keep the show going.
Right.
And so, honestly, it would start with the premise. For a long time, we didn't even write outlines. It was pretty much, okay, well, we like the idea. Go ahead, write the script. And then, and this is mostly for those on staff, because you have to pay freelancers for every draft that they do, in theory. So if you're doing that, then you do need an outline in order to make sure that you're not commissioning something that when the script shows up, you go, oh, wait a minute, that's not what we thought it was at all.
Mm.
So that would be an outline. And once that's approved, then you dive into the scripting. And honestly, with Odyssey, we got spoiled, and maybe some of the shows reflect that we needed more drafts. But honestly, it seemed to me that we often just did three drafts.
Hmm.
You might have that first one, and then notes would be given. And if it didn't need major changes, you'd have the second one, and then you might do one more before you went into the studio,
Hmm.
just to make sure it's cleaned up and you haven't missed anything and all that. So maybe a third draft before you went in the studio. I don't know if that's how it is now, if they still do it that way. But novels are completely different. I mean, it's I guess the parallel would be more like Green Ring or something like that, where you're dealing with a large kind of going through it. But with novels, yeah, you in the old days they used to say you needed to prepare yourself for 2 years
Hmm.
of living with this novel.
Hmm.
Mm.
And that's at the point when it's commissioned. I'm
Hmm.
not even talking about how long it takes you to write a version that a publisher might agree to publish. It's like after you've signed the contract, and if you did do the chapter and the outlines and they accepted that, and then you now are writing the book. And it depends on how, if are you making it all up? Is it a coffee table type thing? Is it something contemporary setting in a world that and so you can write it. You're not sweating the history or the accuracy of history or of a culture you don't know or something like that. Once you move further away from the world that you know or the world that your readers would commonly know, then the work becomes exponentially harder. And the same thing is true for audio drama. The further you get away from a common understanding of what the world is, a living room, people know what living rooms are. So if we put the Barclay family in the living room, or we put the family in Odyssey in a living room, most people get that. But you move them into Narnia, you move them into medieval France, you move them further afield from a common understanding, then the job becomes that much harder to help them imagine what it is that you need them to imagine. And now you're playing this balancing game of hidden exposition where you're revealing exposition but without it sounding like that.
Hmm.
And
Mm.
the same thing with sound effects and everything else that you're doing, whether you're telling the story of Robin Hood, or the Luke reports when we did the stories of Jesus. But even then, Bible stories have the edge that most of our audience in an evangelical world will know what you're talking about with the Bible.
Right.
They can imagine that. But yeah, you give them, 1400s England, they think they might know, but then there are nuances that they can't, and you've got to figure out how to communicate it.
Right.
Mm.
Do you ever struggle with burnout or writer's block?
It's interesting. There are two things. I've never really had writer's block because usually writer's block, at least for me, wasn't an absence of a deficit of ideas. It was that I had too many and I had to make some choices. And
Mm,
I couldn't decide, do I want this book? Should it be first person or third person?
mm,
Should I do this story this way or that way? So I've got more ideas than I can quite figure out what to do with. I've been fortunate in that because I know of writers who have writer's block, whether they do it or not. I read an interesting article that described the difference between writer's block and, let's say, writer's fatigue.
mm,
Writer's block is when you look at a blank page and you have no idea what to put on it.
Mm,
Writer's fatigue is you look at a blank page and you know exactly what needs to go onto that page and you just don't want to do it.
mm,
You just can't muster the energy to start those words or to start however it's going to start. And I have had fatigue from time to time
mm,
where I've just, yeah, I needed to stop. I needed to create some boundaries to protect myself a little bit more by taking on too many deadlines, taking on too many projects at the same time.
mm.
Um, but thankfully, I've never really had writer's block
Okay.
because it can, I know it can be crippling because the danger is you look at the blank page and you think you will never put anything on that page. You will never put anything on that page again. And that's the crippling part of it. But for me, that sort of thing is really almost a psychological game of figuring your way around it. It's not a permanent condition. It's just it's a leg cramp, in the marathon. It's a little something that's going to hold you up, and you just figure out what works for you to get around that thing. And sometimes it's just to completely step away from it, or read or look at something that inspires you. I've been often inspired by things that had nothing to do with what I was working on, but it was the very thing I needed to watch or experience or engage in to free me up again to say, oh, I see what they did there. Oh, I wonder if I can do that over here. And then suddenly things connect. And to me, the writing is a lot like just putting pieces. And I think that may be the difference for me, the way my brain is wired, is once I move on a track with a plot, to me, it's like pieces of a puzzle fitting
mm,
in place.
Mm,
Because if this, then that. Well, and if that, then that next thing. And this. And now you're dealing with your characters and you're going, well, what would my character do? And what should he do? And then it's how do I keep from boring the audience? Why should they care? And so
mhm,
that whole dynamic comes into play too. And then it just sort of, for me, it just sort of slots in and it makes perfect sense to me. In fact, the Odyssey team used to call it the black box effect because I would go into a meeting and we would be talking about a plot line. And I would say, well, seems to me all you need to do is X, Y, and Z. For me, it's solved. The way my brain works, I'd go, you just need to do these things and it'll be fine. And I'll leave the meeting. And they said I would leave the meeting and they would either keep meeting or they would go back to their desks and start working on what I said X, Y, and Z was. And they went, what did he say? What am I supposed to do? And it suddenly doesn't make sense. And the
mm,
joke became it was like Novacom's black box. It was the Paul McCusker black box because it seemed so easy when I put it to them because in my mind it all fit. I knew boom,
mhm.
boom, 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 boom. Okay, this is how you do it. And they went, I have no clue what you're talking about. So my sympathies go out to them.
Which audience do you prefer to write for? Children or adults? Because you've done both. Which one do you enjoy more?
To me, it's negligible what the difference is, to be honest, because we said from the beginning we subscribe to Tolkien and Lewis and greater minds than ours when they said, if you think you're writing a children's story, if you think you're writing for children, then you're already making a mistake.
Mm,
Because the best children's stories, I mean, I still love Winnie the Pooh. For me, the difference between writing for children, writing for a target audience of 10, 11, 12 year olds or whatever, or younger or whatever, it is more just about word choices and getting into the mindset of how they read. But I have to do that with all my audiences.
Mm,
Whether I'm writing for, 18-year-olds or 60-year-olds or 12-year-olds or whoever, um, the process is kind of the same in that I'm thinking of my audience and I'm trying to tell a story that will be compelling to them, but I don't want to exclude other audiences. In other words, Odyssey was always written with the sense that adults shouldn't be penalized for having to listen to a kids show with
Mm.
their kids, the Barney effect, as we would call it later, where they're feeling punished because they have to listen to this thing. We always try to put things in there, and Pixar later on would do the same thing. Make sure that they're writing a good story. And yes, the target audience may be this age, so it's going to determine some word choices or themes that they may or may not engage because it's not appropriate or whatever. But you're aware that you want to write something that those beyond that age group in both directions could engage in. So we knew that in families, the age group that was listening to Odyssey, that they had younger brothers and sisters that were listening. And even if they weren't getting everything conceptually, they were still enjoying it because of the sound, the voices, the whatever they could grasp. So for me, I enjoy, I mean, honestly, it's easier for me in many respects, I guess. If I want to just speak in terms of laziness, it's easier for me to write for my own age, to write for
Hmm.
grown-ups. I guess you could say it's easier, but because I write so much of the other kind, it's because of the Beyond the Mask experience. It's now hard to write for my own age because I don't do it that often. So I'm making different selections of word choices or themes that I want to explore or whatever. So they have different challenges, but um, equally good challenges. But story, story.
Right.
For me, it's the same thing. It's the application that's going to determine the whole specifics of age, of the audience and the subtleties of the audience that you're speaking to. But the story itself, in many ways, you could argue should work, unless you're doing, ultra violence. I mean, the John Wick comic books for, 7-year-olds. I don't think so. But the way things are going now, it wouldn't surprise me.
So, what are some advice to create a hook that will get the readers or the audience's attention? And what is some of your advice for leaving them giving a satisfied ending? More or less.
Well, the hook is intuitive, honestly, because the argument, to put it simplistically, I've heard many writers say, just start later than you think you should.
Hmm.
So very often you got to get caught up. In fact, um, in one of the Father Gilbert's, the novel, one of the problems that I had with that first novel after the series was the question of, I kept wanting to set up a lot. And I realized, no, I had to come in at a point of action. I had to come in, and the point of action doesn't mean high action, gun shooting or,
Hmm.
yeah, shootout or whatever, a bank robbery. It's good if that's the kind of book you're writing, but a high point of action could be a high point of emotional action. Somebody's on their deathbed and suddenly they regret their entire lives. I mean, it could be emotional, it could be any number of things, but the argument tends to be to hook, I don't know, a film producer, to hook a publisher, whatever the case may be. It, what would hook you is the main question.
Mm.
Detach enough from what you intend to do to again get into the mind of who's looking at it and say, okay, uh, and the story goes that Frank Capra did a movie. He did a movie called Lost Horizon, and it was a very long film. And he had done a screening, but the projectionist inadvertently forgot to show the first reel. So basically, the audience saw the film begin at the second reel, and Capra realized he didn't need the first reel. That what was in there he could incorporate more subtly and gently
Mm.
into the rest, but he didn't need to start where he thought he was starting. And that's true for most of us.
Hmm.
I've just recently worked on something where it's a fair argument that I should have started it later than I did. And I can make my case for why I didn't, But as we keep reminding ourselves, we're not going to be sitting in the living rooms of these families explaining to them what we meant to do and why we did it. They're just experiencing the story as it's been given to them. So whatever mistakes we've made, for better or for worse, we're either living with or we need to learn for the next thing.
Hmm.
So,
Mm.
yeah, does that answer the question? Did I answer the question?
Yes, yes, you did. What about for the satisfying ending in your
The satisfying ending is, and Louis Catron, and I had this written down. It's so funny. Surprising predictability was a phrase that kept coming to my mind about endings, because there's a thing about endings. You need to answer all your key dramatic questions. A satisfying ending is going to answer all the key questions, and it has a certain sense of inevitability. The best endings to me are the ones where you go, well, I don't think it could have been any other way. You know what I mean? Even
Mm.
though you could think of a dozen other ways, you realize this was the way it needed. This was the way it needed to end. This was the right ending. And they're
Hmm.
very hard to do. But you answer all the questions and then you've satisfied the audience in terms of their expectations. And like I said, there's this sort of surprising inevitability. The best endings are the ones where it ended the way it should, and you kind of knew all along that it might end that way, but you didn't know how, and you're still surprised by it. So I want to be careful what examples I use, but Avengers Endgame, there you can just point to Avatar, and I mean the animation, the animated series, The Last Airbender.
Mm.
The ones with the best endings, you could just go, well, of course. How could it be any other way? And that's going to be true. Once you've established whatever your core, it doesn't matter whether it's dramatic or comedic or whatever the story is. You want to get to the end and you want it to be satisfying in that it has satisfied the major plot questions and it has satisfied essentially the expectations you gave the audience. See, that's the thing we have to remember as writers. Any expectation that the audience has, we gave them. In essence, our writing begins to make promises that we have to fulfill. And
Mm.
if we're making promises that we can't or won't fulfill, then we shouldn't be making those promises. And we've all seen shows and movies like that.
Hmm.
They started off strong and then they sort of fizzled out because they made promises they couldn't keep.
Hmm.
And that's going to be the main thing. Without getting into specifics about plots and everything else, that's the general idea of how to make a satisfying ending is just those basic principles, I think.
What are your three best tips for directing?
I mean, it's funny. I remember somebody saying that the biggest part of painting, if you've ever painted a room or done anything like that at home, most of your work is in the preparation. And I've heard multiple directors say the number one thing about directing is casting.
Mm.
Because if you have done the job and got your cast in place, a lot of directing is just staying out of the way.
Hmm.
And for
Mm.
me, that's not false humility or anything. Honestly, when I'm working with people who know what they're doing, my job is almost like air traffic control. I'm just sort of there either to make sure we're getting the tracks, like voice tracks. I'm there to work with whoever is at the soundboard and make sure we're getting the tracks and the performance and what we need. But the actual directing is minimal when you're working with a great cast because they come in, they know what they're doing. Hopefully, they know
Mm.
the characters and they know what they're doing. If they don't, then you do have to direct. And really, the secret to that I've heard repeatedly from directors and from actors is just know what it is that you're after and be very clear in telling them what it is that you're trying to get to. And if that means it's just a very straight direction, could you try this line a little bit more like that? Or try this scene a little bit more, less anger and a little bit more something else, or whatever it may be. Or restrained anger. Don't shout your way through the scene. You need, emotional build. You need to
Hmm.
have somewhere to go. And if you're screaming the whole time, it becomes white noise to the audience. Those kinds of things is what the director is watching out. But the main thing, and again, I've heard this from the actors we worked with, especially in London, and they were just, you're clear in your direction. You tell us what we need to do because the actors don't want to be frustrated trying to please you when you don't know what you want.
Hmm.
Mm.
And if you're not articulating it clearly. So I'm not one of those, oh, well, just try this. Could you just try this? What they want is say, how about this? Or pull back, just give them clear direction. But that means you walk in with preparation. You've got yourself a good cast, but you also know the script, you know what it is that you're trying to do. You know what you need. And like with audio drama, I would be looking at the guys at the board because very often, like if it's a Dave Arnold, and he would turn and he'd say, he's talking quietly. You remember they're out in the middle of the woods and there's something going on. So just remember to tell them to project
Hmm.
because those guys are thinking of post production. I'm hearing the performance in the booth at the time we're doing it, but they're thinking, oh, wait a minute. He's a bit subdued here. He's going to be up against a cacophony of wartime sounds or
Hmm.
whatever the case may be. But I think that's the gist of it. Know what you're doing, know what you're doing, know what they're doing, what you need them to do, be clear about it, but try to get yourself a good cast.
Hmm. According to AIO Wiki, you wrote 300 episodes of Adventures in Odyssey,
Mm.
but you're no longer writing episodes for Adventures in Odyssey. What was behind that decision to no longer
Hmm.
write more episodes?
Well, what happened is I left focus on the family. So the direction of my life and my interests, as much as I loved Odyssey, I redirected. And then the question was, could I take everything I'd learned in this context and now apply it to the organization I work with now, which is the Augustine Institute, which is a Catholic organization. So
Hmm.
I'd been received into the church as a Catholic in 2007. And then I continued working and focusing on the family. It was never a problem. I mean, there were no conflicts about it. But my question personally, to be honest, was would it be possible for me to do for the Catholic community what I'd been doing in the evangelical community
Hmm.
30 years, 35 years? Could I take what I've learned here and apply it there? Because the Catholic community had nothing like it.
Hmm.
And many Catholics were listening to Odyssey and, doing things like that. But I just kept thinking, could I tell stories in that context? And then the opportunity came up through, well, Dr. Tim Gray, who's founder and president of the Augustine Institute. He said, I would like you to come to us and do work with us doing what you have been doing all those years at Focus on the Family. And the challenge for me was, yeah, but I'm not interested in writing another Adventures in Odyssey.
Hmm.
I want to tell new stories. I want to come at it differently. And in fact, that's been the thing that I've been doing the whole time. Every time I work on something new, of any kind, I'm going, okay, wait a minute. I did that. I already did that with Adventures in Odyssey. I can't do that again. So how do I do something different so that people won't look at it or listen to it and go, oh yeah, we remember he did that with Odyssey. He's just rerunning. I really don't like I don't ever consciously basically repeat what I've done before. It's
Right.
inevitable subconsciously, but I would never consciously try to do something that I've already done, which means I'm up against 300 episodes at least, and other things like that where I'm going, okay, this is Odyssey's domain, and I don't want to encroach on that.
Hmm.
In many ways, I love the show too much, and in many ways, I just as a creative person, I just don't want to forgive the expression regurgitate something
Hmm.
done before in any way, shape, or form. It's going to happen subconsciously.
Hmm.
It's like a musical artist who just uses a certain chord progression, and it's just what they do, and it's a default thing that they do, whether they're conscious or not. Or themes that a Steven Spielberg will go back to, the Lost Boy themes
Hmm.
that Spielberg constantly goes back to with an orphan of some sort showing
Hmm.
up. He's dealing with certain issues that emerge because it's him,
Right.
but you don't get a sense of him going back and trying to do Jaws over and over again, or the Schindler's List again and again and again, or
Hmm.
something for whatever reason.
What current projects are you most excited about right now? What?
Yeah, what I've been working with at the Augustine Institute, and having said I've been working so hard not to be like Odyssey, I've actually created a small town called Hope Springs. And unlike Odyssey, which is a town you don't even know where it is, this one's actually set in Colorado,
Oh.
Hope Springs, Colorado. And so, what I've been doing over the last 10 years is apart from doing the five audio dramas, the big audio dramas, the radio theater style of St. Francis, St. Cecilia, Patrick, Robin Hood, and Joan of Arc, I've been developing, I did 9 novels called The Adventures of Nick and Sam, set in Hope Springs,
Mm.
a series of short stories, Gabriel's Quest, another series of short stories called Small Wonders, and then 3 bigger books that are time travel called The Virtue Chronicles, also tied into Hope Springs. And
Mm.
I'm now developing and working on a new audio drama called Welcome to Hope Springs.
Oh, okay.
It's about the town. So I've been creating through the books. It's interesting to start with books and then go into audio drama rather than audio drama into books.
Mm,
But what the books allowed was for me to create the mythology, the world,
hmm.
and the interplay of the characters. And then we get to the audio drama, and there's an overlap. They're not dramatizations of the books. It's a whole other thing, but it still dovetails into this town and everything about that. So that's actually what I've been doing for the last 10 years. I've been in a very, it's funny, coming off of Odyssey, the last thing I did for Odyssey, apart from the long end, those 3 scripts, was Ties That Bind and Taking the Plunge. And all of that was the very last thing I did, and then went straight into this whole other thing. So it's been a very productive time. And the simple answer is I can't afford to have writer's block. It's all sort of hanging on me. If I get writer's block, uh, I'm in big trouble. A lot of people are in big trouble if I get writer's block at this point.
Is there a supernatural element, kind of like in Father Gilbert with Hope Springs?
I cannot get away from it. I don't know what it is with me and this, but yeah, there are some in the novel, even in the kids' novels. The Adventures of Nick and Sam
Mm.
has got some things in it that are on the edge of not dark supernatural like Father Gilbert seemed to be. This is a different kind.
Mm,
But yes, so the short answer is I can't seem to get away from exploring those ideas. I love playing with that and just exploring them because I don't know, I just think they're fun. And then there's a whole spiritual side to it that you can explore hand in hand with that. So
Mhm.
yes, there is a component of that in everything I'm doing at the moment.
Ended all my questions. I did have one about Philip Glossman, but I think that was been covered in other areas because I
Yeah.
it's mostly just about why you hate Philip Glossman.
Well,
Why?
he is a weasel of a man. I mean, everybody knows that.
Yeah.
And as I've said repeatedly, if you're going to play a character, see, I was never meant to play him. Well, Phil Lawler is now saying that he fully intended for me to play that part. I'm not an actor. They could have done better. I wish they had. One doesn't want one's legacy to be that. If you're going to be anything, I don't think I want, oh, yes, he was Philip Glossman on my tombstone. Uh,
Sorry.
and, uh, and if you're going to play a bad guy, make up a different voice. This is the only voice I have. And though I will say, I discovered because a few months ago, Nathan Hoopler asked me to come in because they were doing this thing for the Odyssey Club, and he said Glossman was going to be in it. And I went, I think it's time for you to recast that. He was like, no, 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 you need to come in and play this. And if you're going to say no, just don't say no. Come in and do this. So I said, okay. But I realized when I got in there, it's really weird. Like I said, I'm not an actor. But when I got in there, I really had to think through because I realized it's not my voice. It's my voice, but it's a particular version of my voice because
mm,
it's that sneering sarcasm, which I think is where snarky comes from. It's
hmm.
that sneering sarcasm. And I honestly had to think through. I don't talk, I mean, in spite of what some people think, I don't talk that way naturally.
Mm,
I tend not to get into that attitude much at all. Maybe at some point in my life I did, but not much now. So when I sat down at the microphone to record these lines, I really had to think through. I may have even asked them to play me some lines
Hmm.
from a show the last time I played the part. because I simply couldn't think of how to put on the attitude in order to get
Hmm.
sound in my voice that makes it Glossman versus just me talking the way I am now.
Right.
He's just got this thing. So I have to give more credit than I ever did to the fact that there is a character in there. But for me, Glossman just should have been exported or deported or something years ago. I don't know. I got rid of him years ago and I was happy for him to be gone.
And what was this you were reprising? Was that for an episode for the
It
Odyssey
was
of
no, they were doing this little special treasure hunter. They were doing something for
Treasure?
the club. I think it was for the club. And it was some kind of special thing. And honestly, it was like 3 lines. And at the time I was living all of, a stone's throw from Focus on the Family. So it was very easy for me to go in. And so I just nipped in and recorded the lines and they plugged them in and used them. I don't think I've actually ever heard. I haven't heard how it turned out. But I think it was Bob Smithhauser and Jesse. It was one of their podcast thingies, I think.
Oh, okay.
So that might actually be the last time I was in there to do anything official like that.
Paul, thank you so. Wait a minute, Josh, did you have any more questions? I want to make sure
Poor
I'm not.
Josh. He's been waiting for a
No,
chance to say something.
I,
no, this has been great. I'm just here listening, taking notes.
I do
Okay.
tend to talk a little bit more than Josh during the interview episodes.
I don't know what that's like.
But thank you so much for being on the show and letting us talk to
Oh,
you. Like talk.
no, my pleasure.
Oh, here's the question.
Yes.
How can we find your work?
Well, in terms of what I'm doing, I mean, the simplest thing is go to Amazon and just look up Paul McCusker, and that generally has just about everything I've been doing. That's probably it in a nutshell. There's a bunch of stuff you can find on YouTube
Mhm.
if you Google me and maybe the Augustine Institute,
Mhm.
and go to the Augustine Institute. I know they've got stuff posted there. We are still trying to figure out how we're going to release Welcome to Hope Springs. It's a whole different, talk about how different publishing is and
Hmm.
how writers are supposed to get their work out there. It's the same thing for us even now, where it's trying to figure out how in the world do you distribute something like this now?
Yeah.
In a world where in the days with Odyssey and radio theater, we were up against trying to explain to people the difference between what we were producing and audiobooks. Well, now we have to explain the difference between what we're doing and podcasts.
Mm.
Interesting.
Because podcasts are doing integrating a certain amount of drama
Hmm.
into them with scenes and sound effects and even acting voices and stuff. And it's confusing if you're not part of the generation that either knows Odyssey
Mhm.
or the generation when Odyssey started. That generation knew classic audio dramas, radio dramas from the 30s,
Hmm.
40s, and 50s. So when we talked about it, they knew, but we're now all these years beyond that. And so we're up against some new challenges that we have to figure out. But yeah, that's it. I would have pointed you to my own website, but it's I don't think it's been updated for a while, so that's a little embarrassing, honestly.
Well, you could completely obliterated like my entire question supply. So you did great. Thank you so
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I'm known to do that.
much.
When it comes to talking, I'm a giver. I give back a lot more than people ask for, I think. So
This
that's either a good thing or a bad thing. But I'm really happy to see that you have the same phenomenon that I have with, hang on, let me turn this on.
oh, boy.
The
Oh,
You get the light and the fan like perfectly moving. And I'm in a position like here, let's see if it does it. Oh, there you go. So normally I'm in Zoom meetings and I'm looking like I've stepped out of, some kind of an angelic novel or something. And you have the same thing going on behind you. Because you would lean forward and I'm going, oh man, he's got it like it's one of those spinning beanie things. And I've got, look at this. I mean, this is very dramatic.
It's the
I could,
Shekinah glory.
that's what it is. Well, at least you made it something, sacred as opposed to, diabolical. But yeah, I just so I always have to figure out how to turn this stuff off because or figure out how to bring it down. And then people go, "Oh my gosh, has he lost that much hair? Look at the glow. Look, what's going on?" So I have to turn everything off.
my gosh. I'll
See,
check.
it's still going on behind you. There you are.
Yeah, I know. I'm just getting the like.
It's perfect.
I
I know.
can't-
I've seriously thought about reorganizing my office. Here's the other thing about my office. You ready?
Yeah,
Does this look like a really big office?
it kind of
I
does.
was thinking of
But
that for
did
a
you
second.
notice? It's a mirror.
It's a mirror.
The office only goes this far, but the
Oh,
previous owners had these mirrors. And I realized when I sit down in here, you're looking and you're going, wow, look at all the books back there. He's got
That's what I was thinking.
bookcases.
I was like,
It
man, he
goes
must have a
so
good
deep.
library.
And it goes all the way back to, a window and everything. And this is really good until I go like this. And then everybody realizes what it is.
right.
Anyway,
Oh
more
my.
than you wanted to know.
No, that was you made me
That's great.
Okay.
that. But hey,
Well,
yeah,
thanght you. Great to talk to you guys.
it was
Appreciate
great.
Yeah,
you
great
taking the
talking to
time.
you.
This was such
My
an
pleasure.
awesome experience. Thank you.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
if you edit as you need to,
You're right.
I know you've got more than you need. And if there's anything weird, because are you doing this audio or do you do both audio and video?
We're
We
doing
just do audio.
we do
Okay.
audio, and then we're going to be releasing clips of the
Okay. Because I was going to say, if there's weird glitches or anything weird happens, I can put these clothes back on and we can recreate it if you need it done. And if it's just for audio, that's fine too. But I know that when you get in there and you're kind of editing it and there might be something that wasn't articulate or I never did answer a question, just email me and tell me, could we just pick something up? That's fine.
Thank you so much.
I'd rather serve with clarity than throw people off with confusion.
No. I think you articulated everything pretty well. So
Okay.
thank you so
All right.
much for
Well,
your
thank you.
hospitality, sir.
Yeah, no,
Yes.
my pleasure.
Yes. And I hope you have an awesome evening. Josh,
Yeah, you too. God bless, guys. Take care.
Yeah, same to you.
See ya.
All right, bye.